The last, 3 decades, India's IT industry has been this absolute juggernaut, right? It totally transformed the country. But what happens when that engine, that massive growth engine, starts to sputter? That's what we're diving into today. This huge pivot facing India's tech world, a massive shift from a model built on labor to one built on something called leverage. And look, this isn't just some boring corporate strategy talk. No, no. This is a national question. I mean, think about it. What happens when the very industry that basically created your modern middle class suddenly faces this fundamental existential threat? The stakes, they just couldn't be higher. We're talking about a massive structural change here, something that could literally define India's entire economic future for the next generation. Okay, so before we get into the challenges, let's just take a step back and really appreciate the sheer scale of what the IT sector built. Because this wasn't just another industry. For all intents and purposes, it was the economic engine of modern India. And this boom, wow. It wasn't just about software code and exports. It was a complete societal transformation. It literally fueled the rise of this vibrant, aspirational middle class. And what did that middle class do? They bought things. That drove this incredible demand for apartments in cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad, for cars, for better schools for their kids. You're talking millions upon millions of jobs, not just in IT, but all the jobs that support it. All while this steady stream of foreign currency just kept pouring in. This was, without a doubt, the bedrock of the new Indian economy. So the big question is, how? How did this all happen so fast? Well, it was all powered by this brilliantly simple, almost elegant model. Let's call it Phase 1, the era of the labor advantage. Okay, so the secret sauce, the magic ingredient, was this thing called labor arbitrage. And the idea was super simple. You take the huge wage difference between, say, a really smart engineer in India and one in the US or Europe, and you leverage that gap. You could deliver top-notch tech services for a fraction of the cost. I mean, for a while there, it was an absolutely unbeatable formula. And this formula really rested on 3 key pillars. First, obviously that wage difference we just talked about. Second, you had this massive, and I mean massive, growing pool of really skilled English-speaking engineers. And third, and this is crucial, the timing was just perfect. You had the whole Y2K bug scare, which created this huge initial demand. And right after that, this giant wave of global companies all realized they needed to digitize, like yesterday. It created this insatiable demand for exactly what India was offering, the ability to get things done at an incredible price. But, of course, things change, and now a powerful new force is entering the ring, and it's changing the entire equation. We're talking about generative AI. And listen, this isn't just another small tech update. This is a direct, fundamental challenge to the very foundation of that entire Phase 1 model. Okay, think about the old formula. It was super simple, right? Your revenue was basically your number of employees, your headcount, times how much you could build them out for. So if you wanted to make more money, you just hired more people. Simple. But Gen AI comes in and just smashes that logic. It drastically cuts the number of people you need for any given task. It squishes project timelines down. And maybe, most importantly, it automates a ton of those junior-level jobs that used to be the first rung on the career ladder for so many people. That old, straightforward relationship, it's breaking apart. So what does this all lead to? Well, it's a drop in something economists have a fancy term for employment elasticity. But all that really means is that job creation isn't keeping up with revenue growth anymore. So even if these big tech companies keep growing and making more money, they're just not going to be creating jobs at anywhere near the same pace they used to. More revenue no longer equals a flood of new high-paying jobs. And that, right there, is the fundamental structural shift we're talking about. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so this is a problem for the big IT companies. And yeah, it is, but they'll figure it out, they'll adapt. The real risk, the big systemic danger, is for the entire national economy. And it's all about something called the employment multiplier. Just think about the ripple effect for a second. For 3 decades, every time one new IT job was created, that meant a new, stable salary. That salary was used to buy an apartment or a car or pay for better schools. And all that spending supported local businesses, right? The construction workers building the apartments, the teachers, the local shop owners. That one single salary literally multiplied its way through the whole economy. But what happens if that first domino, the creation of that core IT job, starts to slow down or even stops? The entire chain reaction is at risk. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Well, won't new AI jobs just replace the old ones? People point to things like massive data centers being built, but the economics are just completely different. Building a data center costs a fortune. It's super capital intensive, and it's mostly automated. It takes a handful of really, really skilled people to run it, not the millions of white-collar professionals the old services industry employed. It's just not a one-for-one replacement, not even close. So, when you add all of this up, the conclusion is pretty clear. Relying on that old model just isn't a winning strategy for the long run. India is at a genuine inflection point. It needs a massive strategic pivot to what we're going to call phase two. And this quote right here just nails it. The model that powered the last 30 years of incredible growth, it just doesn't have enough gas in the tank to power the next 30. The whole game has to change. It has to shift from just doing things, execution, to owning things. And this really gets to the heart of the pivot. Phase one, that was all about selling labor, right? The billable hours, the skills of millions of fantastic engineers. But phase two, that has to be about selling leverage. It's about owning the core IP, the intellectual property. It's about owning the platforms and the products that create value on their own, exponentially. It's a huge shift from an economy based on services to an economy based on ownership. So what does this phase two economy actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like companies that own the whole shebang. Think about NVIDIA. They don't just sell chips, they own the core designs, the IP that everyone else has to license. Or think about Apple with its walled garden, its unbreakable ecosystem of hardware and software. Or TSMC in Taiwan, which has absolute dominance in making the most advanced chips. These companies, they sell leverage. They're not just billing for someone's time. And that brings us right back to today. India is standing at a crossroads, and there are two very, very different paths forward, two very different futures, depending on the choices that are being made as we speak. Okay, so let's look at the best-case scenario. The current service industry, which is still making a lot of money, uses that cash and all that amazing talent to fund this big transition. You see a whole new generation of product companies, hardware companies, SaaS companies really take off and scale up. India becomes this incredible hybrid, still a powerhouse in services, but also a leader in IP ownership. But the flip side is pretty scary. In the worst case, the service industry just kind of stagnates. Nothing new comes along to replace all that lost job growth. And the economic pressure on a massive, young and ambitious population starts to build and build. And so, that leaves us with the one big ultimate question. Phase one was, by any measure, a historic success. It put India on the global tech map, period. But this next leap, it's just so much harder, so much more complex. It requires a total shift in mindset, in how capital is deployed, in the appetite for risk. So from selling labor to selling leverage, can India make that leap? The answer to that question will absolutely define its future.